Excellent. So thank you all for having me on today, and I'm excited to connect with everyone and to talk about something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. So, um, bivocational is I guess I've been bivocational my whole life. So I've never really been what you would consider full-time in the ministry. I've been full-time in the ministry, but then worked full-time. So I mean, it's just, it's that's the way I've been my whole life. So a little bit about me. Um, I'm 56 years old. The my background is non-traditional. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about when I talk about bivocational is maybe from a different perspective than what most people approach it from. Um, my upbringing, I was come from an extreme broken home. And so I left home when I was 17 and was homeless for about a year and a half uh, while I was trying to figure out kind of what I wanted to do. And so I lived in my car, a tent, the back of a building that one of my employers, the people I worked for, owned. And the reason that I left at 17 is that my mom when my mom and dad got divorced, my dad left, and my mom had no means of support, and so she basically became a criminal, and so she ran a prostitution ring for a period of time, and then graduated from prostitution to drugs, and so she was a manufacturer. Ironically, she's she was very entrepreneurial, but in the wrong things, right? And so we had marijuana farms and speed labs and all sorts of stuff. And so at 17, I just left because it was very much untenable. And uh, so so when I graduated from high school barely because I have some serious learning challenges. I'm very dyslexic, very dyslexic, and I have ADHD. And so it made traditional learning very hard for me because I don't read. I mean, I can read, obviously, but it's complicated for me to read like books. And so the traditional style of learning was and still is very hard for me because I I have a complicated time reading, and so I didn't go to college at all. So I don't have a college degree. I've ne never gone to college. My wife is has her doctorate, and I mean we balance each other out. She has more degrees than a thermometer, and I barely graduated from high school, right? So it was so but coming out of that. I wound up getting in church when I was about in my early 20s. And, I started to walk in faith. And I came from a really strange, I had no real religious background, except maybe Catholicism is probably what I would have said that went to the most. But when they started talking about faith and having faith and how God can open doors, it really opened up my mind as to the art of the possible inside of my life. And I started to step and walk in faith and in all areas of my life, including my career. And so, you know, fast forward 36 years later, and who am I today? I am a minister. So I'm planting our second, the second NAM church that I planted. It's here in North St. Louis. The first one was in Texas. The second one's here in North St. Louis. So we're in the midst of our fifth year church plant. We started 2 weeks before COVID. Perfect timing. So we had two services and then immediately into lockdowns. So it's been complicated, but God's poured out his blessings upon it. Um, you know, I have the privilege and the honor to be able uh, to speak in different places, to be able to help people. I have the ability I get the opportunity because my wife works at Urshan to interact with the students at Urshan College, and I do a lot of mentoring and different things. So from a ministerial perspective, I'm the lead pastor working on growing, not necessarily growing a church, but growing great people. And then the byproduct of that is maybe a church, maybe they go other places, but really focused on growing great people. Additionally, I work in the technology industry for Adobe software, so the PDF and Photoshop people. But I'll stop everyone right now. I don't know anything about Photoshop or PDF because I do manage, well, I have for a long time worked on the digital media side. I mean, marketing side, digital marketing side. So content management systems, but with businesses like GM and Southwest and those that, we help them with understanding uh, their customer experiences, and then how to personalize those and curate them into getting a greater share of the wallet. And what I do for them is that there are two. Um, so when in an organization, you have salespeople, and salespeople are fantastic, but typically not technical, right? So once they get into a meeting and it goes past "Hi, my name is," and they start asking questions, they need someone there that is more of a technical person that can go in and really help, answer the harder questions that come up. And so we call those solution consultants. And they're a mixture between a salesperson and a technical person, but they assist the primary salesperson. And so I manage that team for North America on both the digital marketing and the digital media side. I manage that team across North America. And here's the irony of it. So I have, I've never taken a computer class, right? Right. So the irony is I manage a technical team, and I'm quasi-technical, but I'm not what you would imagine would be the person who would run, a team. But it's a fairly large team. I mean, we have a multi-billion-dollar quota, and you know, hundreds of millions of dollars in payroll. So it's a large team. But that feeds into what we'll probably talk about because as we move forward, which is that, the biggest limiting factor that most people have in in being able to drive a career is themselves. And once we can figure out how to get out of our own way, God can open up doors that allow you to be able to balance everything, to where you can balance ministry, you can balance career, you can advance in career, and it makes time for it all. So that's a little bit about me.
That's quite the thing. Okay. Uh, tech support without having to be techie. That's pretty fun. And you wanted to share your screen and show us some things. So go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely do. But let me back up and just talk a little bit about um, my my thought process around being bivocational. So I've written a book that is getting released on December the 1st, and and it's called, Two Callings, One Purpose. And the idea behind the book is that for years I have always been made to feel that if I wasn't a full-time person, that I was less than what God wanted me to be. But God had never opened up the door for me to be in full-time ministry. And similarly, if you look at the percentage of churches that have full-time leaders, it's a small percentage compared to the overall number. And so I for years and years I felt like it was a kind of a dirty thing for me to say that, well, I'm bivocational. And because when I look at my friends that are in the ministry, I look at the majority of my friends, they're all in that small percentage of full-time ministry. And and so I struggled with it a little bit because I thought, what do I do? And I got some really bad advice from people. I had people tell me, well, listen, you're not going to succeed unless you're totally focused on just, the ministry. And so you should go work at McDonald's and then focus everything else on the ministry. And that was really bad advice, really bad advice. And because one thing that I have learned is in this is that again, what I said earlier, which is that we limit ourselves in what God can actually do from a bivocational perspective. I'm fairly high up in an organization. I have a big management responsibility. I manage I manage managers that manage managers that manage managers that manage people, right? And so as I've grown, my time has become more flexible because of the way that God has allowed it to open up, right? And so I actually have more flexibility in this higher position than I would if I was an individual contributor or a frontline manager. And so if I would have taken that crazy advice, right, then that would have actually it ended in disaster for me. And so when I started thinking about when I started really praying about uh, bivocation and that it's not a bad word, it's something that we can embrace. And then I started to think about how how deep does bivocational go inside of the church? Because I used to think that when I thought about bivocation, it was just about the ministry, the pastor of the church. But then you start to look at the different layers and realize, a Sunday school person who runs Sunday school is bivocational. They're doing ministry and they're working. There's the church is basically bivocational because we have a calling, and then we have a calling to reach the world, and then we have to provide for our family also. And so when you start to look at bivocation, the book that I wrote looked at it from a ministerial perspective, but it also looked at it from a lay minister's perspective, right? Because our churches are full of people that are burning the candle at both ends, trying to really be impactful for both the kingdom of God and for their family. And and I don't know the format, but like if anyone has any questions, you can ask, can they ask? Or do we do interactive or is it
Yeah,
just
we can do that. Absolutely.
okay, okay.
It's
So
up
if
to how
anyone
you want to do it. Yeah,
yeah,
we'll let's
as
do
I
that
go
one.
through this, if anybody has a question, just raise your hand, let me know. I'd be happy to answer it.
Yeah, and we'll try to watch for that. Or also we put them in the chat sometimes and I can
Yep,
read it out to you if somebody just wants to
perfect.
do that too. So
Perfect. And so as I started to wrap my head around it and I started to realize and I started mentoring more people, uh I realized that, that people's desire to do a work for the Lord is so strong, and the misconception of the negative of having to work is also so strong. And so I've been working. So I'm using myself as an example. Um, I will always be bivocational. I retire in a few years, and I will always be bivocational up until the point at which I retire. And and I say that because my goal in church planting is to grow we're almost there, grow our church to about 100 people, split the church, start another church in a different area of town, grow it to 100, split the churches, and I'd rather have 15 churches of 100 than one church of 1,500 because it's just my perspective. Now, that's not against anyone who has a church of 1,500, but I grew up in a more community-based church where everyone was really connected together. And so I lean towards that. But that model doesn't provide for me the distance between where I'm at from a work perspective and what I can do with that versus that model doesn't lean towards full-time ministry. But I also feel like because of how I've gotten in my career allows me to do things for the church that I could have never done if I was full-time, right? So and for other ministries that I'm allowed that God has opened the door for me to be able to provide with. So so if we if we come to the premise, or if we come to the conclusion that there are going to be bivocational people inside of our ministries, whether it's me as a pastor or other people inside of my church, then it breaks down to this. And this is going to sound really bad, but it's how I think. Okay. But if I'm going to work for an hour, I can either choose to make $10 an hour or $1,000 an hour. It's the same hour, right? And so my encouragement to people is that, listen, if you're going to be bivocational, if you're going to work, then we need to open up our thought process to the fact that God can open up a door that puts you in the 300, $400 an hour category rather than the $10 an hour category. And using myself as an example, my career, there is no logic in how I advanced to where am at, except for the fact that God has done what he's done. I go into meetings, and my old boss, before this last one I have, the one I have now, used to go around the table and introduce everyone and say, introduce who you are and what school you went to. And so I would sit there, and it's like, Harvard and Duke and all these different schools, and come around to me, and I'd be like, David McCurrach, Richardson High School. And so that only happened once, and he stopped asking that question in those meetings, right? And so, but I had the largest team on his team, right? I drove the largest percentage of the business for the team. And so I have discovered through my personal experience that there are no limitations that God has in our career and what he can do, except for the fact of what we can comprehend and are willing to take a risk on. And that's what I want to share real quick, my theory. Now, listen, again, I am not the smartest person. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. So lots of stuff that I talk about, I just think of, right? And there's probably better ways of approaching it, but I just have to approach it from where I'm at. So, so when we say that, okay, if I believe that I can be bivocational and be ministry, and I believe that God can open up the doors, what stops me from being who God sees me as versus how I see myself? And I have to discover that, because the chances are is that, and I am gonna share this with you because I think that this is for me kind of a really aha moment for me, and in understanding what keeps me from achieving. Because once people realize that there's no real limits, then they can reach for things and get to areas where you just never imagined you would ever go. And I just say that from experience. So let me see if I can make this work. Okay, you should see a blank desktop.
Yes.
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 Okay. And I'm going to go to here. Okay. So there is something that I call that there's a David's theory on someone asks me, what do you look for in people? And because I'm a man, I hire a lot of people, right? I hire a bunch of people. So what do you look at in people? And I look at in people what I've had to do myself. And that is I look for extraordinary people, right? So we've shifted over to say, okay, I'm gonna be bivocational, and God can do anything. And so but I have to learn how to live in the extraordinary, not in the ordinary, because 99.999% of the people live in the ordinary. Church people live in the ordinary. But God has not called us to be ordinary, but extraordinary. So here's what I discovered. So we're going to take this box here and we're going to call this ordinary. Okay. And then out here is extraordinary. And this box is very, very real because and we go back to it's so funny because I give this I gave this talk at a college in Chicago. And of course, then I couldn't talk about the biblical application of it, but I'm going to talk about the biblical application here. Let's take the children of Israel as an example. You know, they're in bondage, they're in slavery. God sends someone to bring them out, so they come out. They get to the Red Sea, they're going to die. You know, they think they brought them out there for no reason. He opens the Red Sea, passes through the Red Sea. They get all the way to the the front door of the Promised Land, and they say, um, "Nope, can't do it. It's not possible." And so God sends them into the wilderness. Now, here is the scary thing about that. Did they have church in the wilderness? All the time, right? Did miracles happen in the wilderness? Every single day. Did God provide for them in the wilderness? Every single day. Is that where God wanted them? No. So that means that we can be going to church, having miracles, and God providing for us and living in that box called ordinary, right? Because we didn't have the faith to step out into the extraordinary. But what keeps us in that box of ordinary? Because something keeps us in there. So let's talk about it real fast. For everyone, it's different. And for me, I'm going to tell you what it is for me. Okay. Because overcoming this is what allows us to be able to take risks and challenge or chances that are outside of what we normally would. For me, the first one is fear. I'm afraid of failure, right? Even though I've failed a bunch, that fear is ever present on that is part of my box. And that fear feeds doubt. And that doubt is the hesitation that keeps me from stepping out, right? It's not just the fear, but it's the doubt that rises from that fear. And then those awesome people around us that are so sensible and tell us, "Are you sure that's what you want to do?" Because now they're feeding my fear and my doubt both, right? And then finally, you're past. You know, I've tried this before, it didn't work, and that stokes my fear and my doubt. And then I got someone else on the other side saying, yeah, that didn't work, did it? Right. And so these things keep us inside this box called ordinary. And then what we have to figure out how to do is we got to figure out, okay, in order for me to be extraordinary, I'm going to have to recognize what keeps me from being extraordinary and what keeps me being ordinary. And then I got to break through that in circumstances. Because here's the challenge. We live in ordinary. We venture into extraordinary, but then life pulls us back into ordinary. And then we have to venture back out into extraordinary. And then life pulls us back into ordinary. And so we don't live out in extraordinary, but we have to journey out into extraordinary. And why is that so important? Because if I'm trying something in the ordinary and it fails, then I have failed. If I try something in the extraordinary and it fails, then I don't see it as a failure. I see it as an opportunity to learn from it. I see it as an opportunity to tweak and try again. I'm not giving up. Failure in the ordinary is typically people give up. For failure in the extraordinary, people tend to drive forward. It's just they have to iterate on what they're doing. And so this core theory for me is what has helped me to say, okay, you know what? I'm ever since the garden, we've been put into ordinary. But I'm going to push out. So whenever I'm faced with something from a career perspective that is scary. I have to identify this. I got to find people who will encourage me, and I got to press out there and be willing to take risks that are way bigger than me because my God is so much bigger than who I am, right? And so I have to stop doing the limitations. That is how you go. That to me, and from my experience from what's happened with me, is what changes from working at $10 an hour versus $1,000 an hour, right? But it's so hard for people to do this because it's very comfortable to be ordinary. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. That was good.
Okay, let me stop sharing. And so as we look at bivocational, if the big part of being of the bivocational piece is realizing that it's not just about having a job, but it's about having something that will enable the ministerial part of what we're trying to do. And that's where people get lost. And that's where people look at it as, oh, this is just a job. And they're upset that they have to do it. I look at it as an opportunity to enable a ministry in ways that I would have never been able to enable it, right? I know we only have a couple of minutes left. I hope that was helpful. It went by really fast.
Yeah, it was very good. And sorry that you have to leave early, just to let
I'm
everybody
so
know
sorry.
he
This is
had
one of
he had
those
something come
bivocational
up.
challenges, right?
Yes.
The big bosses scheduled a meeting that they mandated that I be there at 1 o'clock.
So, and he had no idea that before that. Very good information. Why don't you tell us real quick? You said that your book comes out December 1st.
It does. It comes out in digital format December 1st and in paperback December 14th. So
And
if you would like, I put my email address in
mhm.
the chat. Our pre-order site will be available on our website, which is hopeupc.com. um, tomorrow morning. And it's supposed to go live tomorrow morning for pre-orders. You can do that. If you have any problems, you can always, you know, uh, use that email address to reach out to me. If you have any questions or just want to, ask something, I'm an open book. I love to help people. That's my calling. What God's called me to do is to help you. Our church is called Hope, but I always joke around. It's helping other people excel. That's
Oh,
really
that's
what we
cool. That's
have to do,
cool.
right?
They're asking what's the name of your book,
Two callings, one purpose, thriving bivocationally.
which was in the um
The email.
email that was sent out, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think and talk and spell all at once. I don't think I did a good
Okay.
job on that. Multitasking.
No problem.
All right. Well, David, thank you so much for taking that half an hour, and we're sorry that you have to go quickly. You're certainly welcome to come back on one of our,
I'd
um,
love to.
we have these once a month, so we'd love to have you back on, whether it's just to be a participant or maybe in the future we can get you back on to talk some more after the book's already out.
Sounds
So,
great.
all right. If we have any questions, you can give him a holler via email, and we'll let him go so he doesn't get in trouble with his boss. Thank
I
you
want to
much.
stay bivocational, so thank you.
Okay. Have a great day.